He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
I was doing my breakfast show on Gold, the home of the greatest hits. The newspaper arrived at 5 in the morning and it was the Herald. At the top, there was the banner that said nearly 200 firms probed in migrant visa scandal. Says the New Zealand Herald, Monday, September 4. And then it has a big picture of a very grumpy-looking Christopher Luxon. The script says advertisement, and then Christopher Luxon, out of touch, too much risk.
That was News Talk ZB's afternoon host Andrew Dickens telling listeners how the front page of ZB's NZME stablemate, the New Zealand Herald, startled him last Monday morning because it had been taken over by an attack ad bought, paid for and made for the Council of Trade Unions. Now, the same almost gothically grumpy image of the National Party leader also stared down from billboards around the country that same morning, and it was in spookily soundtracked social media ads setting out the CTU's reasons for rating Luxon as out of touch and too risky.
He'll make you pay for prescriptions. And he plans to give billions in tax cuts to landlords, which puts funding for schools and hospitals at risk. Luxon isn't the right leader in a cost of living crisis because he doesn't understand.
Now, that was clearly an election advocacy ad, and it was identified as such in the Herald. But as soon as it came through the Herald's ad department, the senior editors there must have known that the Herald's decision to host it would also have become news. ZB's Andrew Dickens certainly thought it was.
I think that this is news. This is why I'm talking about it on the radio. It's my company, but I'm not involved with this decision. It's another branch over there. And I think they need to write about it and say how they actually determine who gets the wraparounds.
And it did indeed raise questions about picking and choosing of advertisers, as we'll hear later. But the Herald didn't want to talk about it on RNZ's midday report that same day.
Murray Kirkness, NZME's Chief Content Officer for Publishing, has declined our request for an interview.
And back on ZB, the morning host Kerry Woodham said it was all about the money for the Herald and not the politics.
That's democracy, and if citizens and ratepayers decided to put something out about Hipkins' inability to be an effective Prime Minister, then I'm quite sure the Herald would take the money and wrap the ad around the newspaper. You got to survive in the media. You got to take the ads.
And a former Herald editor, Tim Murphy, also pointed out on Monday that election ads on the front page aren't entirely unprecedented. In previous elections, the Herald has allowed the National Party to add detachable blue stickers to the weekend edition until late in the campaign. And once papers opened the door to wraparound front and back page ads for retailers, it was only a matter of time, he said, before someone selling political messages rather than fridges took up the space as well. That was something Andrew Dickens noted on ZB on Monday.
You have to say those Harvey Norman ads are very welcome in a cost of living crisis which sees advertising down.
Now, Andrew Dickens went on to explain to his ZB listeners that CTU attack ad was within the rules for political promotion by third parties. As long as they're registered, they can spend the thick end of $400,000 on ads doing down political opponents if they want to. And one such registered outfit is the New Zealand Taxpayers Union, which says it's non-partisan, but has placed a lot of large newspaper ads recently, giving the government a hard time. Now, one recent double-page Taxpayers Union ad in the Stuff daily papers even darkly accused the government of Soviet-style central planning and depicted the Prime Minister Chris Hipkins on some sort of Cossack horse. But in spite of that, the New Zealand Taxpayers Union complained this week that the CTU's Herald ad was inappropriate. And it turned out that its executive director, Jordan Williams, was listening to Andrew Dickens on ZB on Monday, and he phoned in to explain.
But I can't recall any ad we've done that leads with, frankly, just an ad hominem attack. Every one of our campaigns is focused around policy. Now, of course, we use the pictures of the politicians or the decision makers, but this, look at the Christopher Luxon, out of touch, too much risk. The front page of the Herald, there's no reference to policy whatsoever.
Though, as Andrew Dickens pointed out, the political policy points were just over the page in the Herald, and the CTU wasn't spending any taxpayers' money. So what was their problem?
The difference between us and the CTU, though, is every single person that has paid for that ad supports the cause. The CTU have a heck of a lot of members that actually don't support Labor.
though how would he know if all Taxpayers Union members do support the cause as expressed in all of their ads, while members of the Council of Trade Unions don't support that particular one? On scoop.co.nz, Gordon Campbell pointed out that front page posse notwithstanding, there was nothing really novel about an ad criticising a party leader who was actively campaigning as the embodiment of his party's policies. And that's probably what the Herald reckoned when they okayed that front page takeover. On News Talk ZB, Andrew Dickens added this.
And here's the other thing. This will probably backfire on the Herald, to be fair, because, here we go, here's a text right now. I have cancelled my subscription to the New Zealand Herald because of the ad on the front cover. To say this has nothing to do with the Labour Party is nonsense.
And true enough, it's not just an issue for the paper, but also for commercial radio networks like his own.
And I know that we have, a star booklet which actually talks about what we can accept and what we can't. And while obviously we will not accept ads that are false, wrong, lies, or are defamation.
And News Talk ZB found that out back in 2019 when it ran a political ad in which mayoral candidate John Tamahere said no suburb will escape the crazy plan to cut the speed limits on Auckland roads. The Advertising Standards Authority said, in fact, that was false, and NZME told the Advertising Standards Authority apologetically it had presumed the client's script and figures provided were correct. And it said,
our team has been reminded to be vigilant when accepting advocacy advertisements to avoid this from reoccurring.
So in other words, they promised to do fact checks before cashing checks from people peddling political propaganda at election time. But at that time, the Herald had just published another political ad, also coincidentally featuring Christopher Luxon. Now, he was not even a member of the National Party at that point, let alone a candidate. But the Herald's half-page ad showed former Prime Minister John Key morphing into Christopher Luxon, and the ad also made the news for this reason.
An advertisement with the New Zealand Herald on Saturday suggesting the outgoing Air New Zealand chief executive should run for the National Party leadership for next year's election is unlawful. The ad is a reworking of Dick Frizzell's well-known artwork, Mickey Tutiki.
Well, the client for that ad turned out to be not the Nats, but property tycoon Stephen Brooks, who really wanted National to make Luxon their next John Key. And at the time, another former Herald editor, Gavin Ellis, wasn't impressed.
It surprised me greatly that the Herald on Sunday would run that ad without first checking with the National Party and Mr Luxon to see whether they were responsible.
Well, in fact, it was the Weekend Herald and not the Herald on Sunday that took that ad, but that's all history now. But last Monday, ZB listeners were phoning in more concerned about other ads that the Herald wouldn't print in the recent past.
I heard from Bob McCoskey at Family First that he had an ad to play, willing to pay for it and was not allowed. I don't understand that.
And indeed, I've got a number of texts actually talking about a more gentle issue on gender. There was ads about that have been denied by some media organisations.
I just wonder how they pick and choose.
Well, there, the caller Mary was referring to a recent ad campaign from the lobby group Family First, which our three biggest newspaper publishers all declined to run. Family First's leader Bob McCoskey accused them of colluding to cancel the ad, which had the slogan, "What is a woman?" and the address for a campaign website arguing it's time to push back against gender self-identification. Now, he said the ad departments of each publisher had initially accepted the ad, but then the editors decided they weren't fit to print. But while the paper publishers exercised their right not to print that ad, they did go up on billboards in public. And last month, the Advertising Standards Authority Complaints Board upheld a complaint about them, ruling the ad was misleading and not socially responsible because the identity of the advertiser, Family First, wasn't sufficiently clear for an advocacy ad. Now, for all the objections to the aggressively political nature of the CTU's Christopher Luxon ad in the Herald last Monday, that wasn't the issue at all. But from today, Sunday the 10th of September, things are a little different in our media. Until the day before the election, we're in the official election period. So during this time, special rules and a separate dedicated code of broadcasting practice apply to what are known as election programs, which are defined as advertisements by or for a party or candidate, broadcast on radio or TV, and which encourage voters to vote in particular ways or for particular parties or people. So broadcasters and publishers will be paying extra attention to balance and fairness now, with the watchdogs running a special fast-track process for complaints about things like serious allegations about integrity and seriously misleading claims.